live via satellite from Hollywood, it's RockLine, the show where you ask the questions for the biggest stars in rock and roll. Hello, I'm Rita Wild, filling in for Bob Coburn. RockLine is brought to you in part by Budweiser, nothing beats a Bud, by AT&T, the proud sponsor of the 1992 U.S. Olympic team, and by the U.S. Army. Learn how you can get an edge on life. Be all you can be. Tonight on RockLine, we'll spend some time with Pat DiNizio of the Smithereens. So get your questions ready and call us toll-free in the U.S. and Canada at 1-800-344-ROCK. That's 1-800-344-7625. One number toll-free from anywhere in North America. The Smithereens have that rare quality in rock and roll, which is the ability to write and record songs that sound familiar but are original. Hearing one of their songs is like getting a phone call from a good friend who you haven't spoken to in years. And with that, RockLine is very pleased to welcome the Smithereens' chief songwriter, vocalist, and guitarist, Pat DiNizio.
Hello, Rita.
How you doing?
I'm doing real well. It's good to be here with you.
Finding a little bit of a cold, are you?
No, miraculously, my voice seems to have come back just in time for airtime.
That's great. The Smithereens are one of those bands that are known for their live performances. Now, you recently did your first ever tour of Australia, a country that thrives on live music. What was that like?
It was an interesting experience, to say the least. In fact, we're all suffering from tremendous jet lag at this point. Our hours are sort of upside down, but it was sort of like one's career being reborn. In fact, it almost brought us back to the feeling that we experienced on the first tour in support of an album we put out in 1986 called Especially For You. Lots of cover stories, sort of top 40 Australian success. Of course, the market there is a lot different than what we experience here. I think 35,000 records sold is equivalent to gold there, but it was wonderful. Wonderfully warm crowds, a lot of people at the shows, and I mean, we have no complaints.
That's terrific. Now, one way to get really good live is to tour and to tour and to tour. In fact, you're going to be kicking off another leg of your American tour on the 28th in Detroit. How many live dates do you do a year?
Well, I would say that in support of any Smithereens album that comes out, we're on the road for at least a year at a time.
That's amazing.
Well, it's something that we have to do. We've never been the type of band whose records sold easily without the type of touring that we have to do. It's just a way of life with us at this point.
But there's a lot of bands that don't like that part of the aspect of the industry. They like the recording, but they don't like to go out and play. But you guys seem to be that kind of band that loves it.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, it gets to be a weary situation after a bit of time on the road because, quite contrary to the popular opinion that the rock and roll lifestyle is perhaps a glamorous one, I would say that for the most part, most of what you see when you tour around any country is the inside of the bus looking out, or the dressing room, or the inside of a hotel room. And obviously, if you're going to do your job properly, if you're going on the road and you're doing interviews in each city that you're in, and you're doing television and radio as well, there's really not that much time for sightseeing or leisure activity.
Now, speaking of doing some live stuff, we have 5 guitars in here tonight. We expect a song off each and every one of them, so maybe we'll get that tonight.
As long as you join me.
For the high harmonies. Your latest record, Blow Up, is a real natural progression for the band. You've kept your sound intact, but yet you've added a new dimension with the mellotron and string sections as well.
Well, we felt that logically, in terms of our career and in terms of the music that we've been producing for record for the past 5 or 6 years, it was time to expand a bit, expand our horizons musically, as it were. And we felt that the inclusion of a string section on 3 tracks on the new album was quite a natural evolution for us. And people will ask you, well, how do you duplicate that or recreate it live? And the fact of the matter is that if a song is sound structurally, if it works on an acoustic guitar, it will work live, regardless of whether you can reproduce the studio arrangement or not.
Now, the first track we're going to play tonight is Top of the Pops. I understand that there's a very funny story that goes along with the video that you made for this.
Where do you get these questions from, Rita? Well, yeah, actually, see, we shot the video for Top of the Pops in Atlantic City, a locale which has not been used very often for the so-called rock video. And in fact, the last thing that they had filmed there was this Louis Malle movie called Atlantic City, starring Burt Lancaster and Susan Sarandon many, many years ago. And in fact, when you film in Atlantic City, they give you one blanket permit to film anywhere you want in the town, any hour of the day, except for inside the casino. So they make it very easy to work down there. They're wonderfully helpful to anyone that wants to go down there and film anything. We filmed it in and around Atlantic City, in fact, in some of the impoverished areas as well as the casinos. And the very last reel of the footage shot for the Top of the Pops video was done in the Ivana Trump High Roller Suite in the Trump Castle Hotel. And it was a sort of poking fun good-naturedly and a sort of parody, tongue-in-cheek parody of the rock lifestyle. But apparently the last 2 rolls of film footage were lost during the processing stage when a truck carrying 300 live chickens crashed into the developing plant.
Quite a miss.
Yeah, we called it poultry in motion or foul play.
Oh, here it is, Top of the Pops on RockLine. Top of the Pops from Blow Up, the latest from the Smithereens. It is the Smithereens on RockLine tonight, so give us a call on our AT&T toll-free number at 1-800-344-ROCK. When you dial RockLine, you're using AT&T, the right choice. Welcome back to RockLine and our evening with Pat DiNizio of the Smithereens. By the way, everyone who gets on the air tonight will win an autographed copy of the latest CD by the Smithereens called Blow Up, courtesy of Capitol Records. So let's hear from you tonight at 1-800-344-ROCK. Michael has the distinction of being our first caller tonight. He is in Manchester, New Hampshire, listening to Rock 101. Hello, Michael. Say hello to Pat.
Hello, Pat.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
Hi, how you doing? I don't know if you remember me. I'm from the band Black Comedy.
Oh, yeah, man. How you doing?
Pretty good. Yeah, I had a question. When I was talking to you at UNH, you told me you were going to be in a movie called Singles. And I don't know if that's still coming out or what the deal is with
Mike,
that.
you're the greatest promotion guy that I could ever dream of. I would never think of bringing that up myself, not to blow my own horn. It's coming out. It's supposed to come out in March, Mike, or April. I spoke with the director, or I should say I called him and he faxed me back. And it's coming out in March. And it's apparently the 9 scenes that I was actually filmed in have been trimmed down to 1 or 2. So if you blink, you'll miss me, Michael.
Now, that's a film that Cameron Crowe wrote. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, Cameron Crowe, who we remember from being the sort of whiz kid rock and roll writer for Rolling Stone, who was able to ingratiate himself with the likes of Led Zeppelin and Bob Dylan and these people when he was a kid. Later went on to write Fast Times at Ridgemont High and directed a film for Warner Brothers called Say Anything, for which I wrote a song called A Girl Like You, but after a minor argument with the producer, we declined to give them the song. There was something about changing the lyrics to the song. In any event, I think as a form of payback of some sort, Cameron offered me a part in the film.
Are you going to do any music for the soundtrack? Because I hear they have Alice in Chains on the soundtrack. And
no, I think that the film soundtrack has actually taken a sort of Seattle grunge direction, and you've got Soundgarden in it and Nirvana. I wonder why that's happened.
Thanks for the call, Michael. Let's move on to Augusta, Georgia, and speak with Jeff, a listener of 96RXR.
Hi, Pat.
Hi, Jeff.
How's it going?
Real good.
Been a big fan for a lot of years, but I'm having problems completing my Smithereens collection. I'm looking for the Girls About Town EP from 1980.
Yeah, I think that there are plans for us to re-release that and with some other rare and unreleased cuts and B-sides that were just released in Europe. I've been talking to Hal Milgram, the president of Capitol Records, about doing that as something to fill in the in-betweens between the latest album, Blow Up, and the next album. So hopefully that will be included on it. And I've talked to the various members of the band, and they're very much in agreement that we should release that. But the Girls About Town EP, for your information, was released on Halloween of 1980, and it was a 4-song, 7-inch piece of vinyl with a picture sleeve. All the songs contain the title Girls in it. Wow. Very, very smart indeed. And I think we pressed up 1,500 copies of that, most of which we wound up giving away to various fans and club owners. And we felt that for any band starting out their career, especially at that time, now vinyl is pretty much defunct in any event. But we felt that it was a better policy to press up vinyl because you could give a record, a piece of vinyl, to someone who would book you in a nightclub, and it was a real thing. It was something that existed, and they couldn't tape over it like a cassette.
But those are real collector's items now.
Yeah.
Do you have another question, Jeff?
Yeah, I wanted to know about the Otis Blackwell LPs from '83. Will that ever be released again?
You know, Otis right now, in case anyone is interested, he's in a hospital in Nashville, and I'm sure he would appreciate any letters from anybody, or any type of support or phone calls or visits. Perhaps he had a stroke some time ago, and he's not feeling real well. But when we worked with Otis Blackwell, we were his backup band for about a year. We were billed as Otis Blackwell and the Smithereens, and there were 2 albums that were issued on his own label, Rocco Records, which I believe stood for Ray, Otis, and Chuck Records, and they were released independently. In fact, he only sold the records at gigs, and one was called In the Beginning and the other one was called Let's Talk About Us, and they're very, very hard to find. We're trying to track down those original tapes to include on this collection that we plan to release between the next 2 albums.
That's going to be quite a set. Thank you for your phone call, Jeff. Right now, let's go back to Especially for You for this one, Blood and Roses on RockLine. Blood and Roses on RockLine. I'm Rita Wild for Bob Coburn. We're spending an evening with Pat DiNizio of the Smithereens as we go back to the phones for more of your questions. Let's speak with Larry, a listener of the Loop FM 98 in Chicago. Larry, say hello to Pat.
Hello, Pat.
Hi, Larry. How are things home in Chicago?
Pretty good. I wrote you a few years ago something about reading music. I don't know if you remember. But I was wondering why the change from the Rickenbacker to the other guitars that I can hear. Is there any special reason for that?
Well, no reason in particular other than the public perception that we've stopped using them, which is not really the truth. We certainly use the Rickenbackers in the studio. They're actually all over the records, but even dating back to the early days, it just wasn't the Rickenbacker guitars on the record. There were SGs and Gretches and Stratocasters and Telecasters, many different guitars used in the blend of sound. We stopped using the Rickenbackers live because they're delicate instruments. They're in many ways they're sort of the Stradivarius of the electric guitar, and I don't think they were ever meant in terms of their design and construction to be the type of guitars that you bang to death every night on stage and sweat on as we do every night. They weren't necessarily meant to be the workhorses of rock and roll like perhaps a Strat would be, which is more of a carved out of a piece of log or something. But we still love the Rickenbackers, and we do use them. In fact, I was thinking today about bringing my old one that I used on the first tour out of mothball, so perhaps your call has inspired me to do so.
Well, you recently moved to Chicago, didn't you?
That's right.
Yeah, about a year ago, and I understand you're thinking about moving again, maybe?
I think we're planning on moving to New Orleans. In terms of the grand scheme, the grand plan of constant inspiration and musical reinvention, just to sort of write a different album in a different city. No, there are no immediate plans to move from Chicago, but we're going to spend a little time in New Orleans.
Well, both of them certainly are musical towns. Thank you for your phone call, Larry. Let's speak with Tom. He is a listener of 96 QMF in Louisville, Kentucky. Tom, you're on the RockLine.
Yes, I'm a big fan of yours, and I had read in Rolling Stone about 6 months back that a couple members of your band had done some recording with Bruce Springsteen. Is there any, is that true, or?
No, that's not true, Tom. What it was that we were in A&M Studios in Hollywood, which are the old Charlie Chaplin film studios. In fact, if you walk through the lot, you'll see Chaplin's footprints, the little tramp walking sideways in cement there for all the world to see. But we were in the studio at a remarkable time. Motley Crue was in the next studio. Luther Vandross was there. Richie Zambora from Bon Jovi. Alice Cooper was there, as well as Bruce Springsteen. And we had met Bruce casually a few times. We're both from the same part of the world, from New Jersey, in fact, perhaps 20 miles away from each other. And he was walking down the hallway, and I stopped him, and I asked if he would take a picture with us. And we talked about our album, and he talked about his, and it was really as simple as that, exploiting Bruce to get our picture in Rolling Stone. But we didn't record with him. But I've heard remarkable things about his new records coming out. And in fact, he had just finished the mixing of one of what is now a two album project. But apparently it was just fantastic according to the engineers who had worked on it. And then the next day he scrapped it to write 20 new songs apparently.
That's the way he works. Thank you for your phone call, Tom. We're going to be back with more of your phone calls. In fact, we're going to have Pat play live for us next on RockLine on the Global Satellite Network.
XRC, Charlotte's rock and roll station.
Welcome back to RockLine and our evening with Pat DiNizio of the Smithereens. Next week on RockLine, we'll give you the chance to call in and talk live with all 4 members of Metallica. That's Metallica making their first ever RockLine appearance 1 week from tonight. Right now, we're with Pat DiNizio of the Smithereens. You've got a nice Martin D28 in your hands, and you're going to play something live for us.
Yeah, I'll do a song called Only a Memory, which is from our album Green Thoughts.
Is filled with thoughts of you. I think about the days of 2. I search the room, but you're not there. Your perfume lingers everywhere, but it's only a memory of what our love was going to be. Only a memory, broken bits of you and me. Only a memory. Only a memory. In a world of pain, I have no fear. You fade away and disappear. And now I have to learn the game when no one wins or takes the blame. But it's only a memory of what our love was going to be. Only a memory. Now that we are history. Only a memory. Only a memory. Well, should it matter if I cry or sit around and wonder why? Now I feel much too weak to live, and I've got nothing left to give. But it's only a memory of what our love was going to be. Only a memory, broken bits of you and me. Only a memory. 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 A memory. 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 Only a memory.
Yeah.
Where's our studio audience?
Right there. Only a memory. That's real nice. Was it difficult for you joining such a close-knit family, the other members of the band, Mike, Jim, and Dennis? They'd known each other since they were kids. Was it hard for you coming into that kind of a situation?
Well, actually, it sort of took about a year to warm up to the rest of the guys. I had known Dennis previously. We had a band together about 2 years before that, a sort of quote-unquote new wave cover band, but we were doing material by Buddy Holly, by the Rolling Stones, by the Beatles, of course, but also some of the latter-day singer-songwriters, people like Elvis Costello and Nick Lowe. We were doing songs by The Jam. We even did a Devo cover.
Wow.
You know, we felt that perhaps that was the best of the new music being produced at that time. I remember doing a song called Whole Wide World by Reckless Eric, which is one of my favorites. But we really couldn't get work. You know, we knocked ourselves out for 9 months in a basement, and no one was interested in booking a cover band that did that type of material. So at that point, we decided to call it a day, and I began to write songs. And I called Dennis when I decided the songs were in good enough shape to do some demos. And he brought down his two friends, Mike and Jimmy, and it just clicked. I mean, there was a certain musical chemistry that was there from the moment we actually sat down to play together. And, they're from a different part of the world than I am, even though they're only 15 or 16 miles away. Carteret is sort of a blue-collar refinery town, and Scotch Plains was more of a colonial sort of town, the type of town that was founded in the 1600s where everything closes up at 6 or 7 at night. There were perhaps 2 bars in the whole of the town. And so certainly it did take a while to get used to each other. But now it's sort of an extended family and a brotherhood of sorts, and we get along quite nicely after 12 years. Yeah. Thank you.
A cohesive unit indeed. Let's go back to the phones and speak with Bill, a listener of 94.5 KLQ in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Bill, you're on the Rock Line with Pat.
Hi, Pat.
Hi, Bill.
You remember the Smithereens concert in Grand Rapids last November for LEV's 17th birthday party?
Yeah, I sure do. That big hall there was about 4,000 people.
Yeah, you played Yellow Submarine as an encore.
Did you enjoy that?
I loved it. I was singing along as loud as anyone else there.
Thank you. There are certain members of the band that don't enjoy playing that anymore. They feel rather foolish. But
it was great. My question is, you have a lot of songs that don't make it onto your records. When you write songs for a new record, do you write maybe 15 or 20 and just pick the best? And what happens to the ones that don't make it, if there are any?
Okay, well, in the case of Smithereens 11, the predecessor to the new album Blow Up, I wrote 11 songs, 10 of which made the album. There was a song called Like Someone in Love, which was sort of a heavy number, a heavy driving rock and roll number. And it sounded great in the demo form, but somehow the finished product, in conjunction with the rest of the band and the producer, just didn't make it. And it was the 11th song. And it was left off the record. It wound up as a B-side. I believe it was the B-side of A Girl Like You. So that's sort of what you do with that type of thing. Some groups prefer to leave the outtakes from the album that's been released for the next record, perhaps. I know the Stones did it with Some Girls with that record. They saved a lot of material. If there were 12 songs on the album, they may have recorded double that amount, and they used most of it on the follow-up. On the latest record, Blow Up, or I should say for the latest album, I actually wrote about 18 songs, 9 of which wound up on the album. There's a Jimmy Babjack composition, our guitarist Jimmy, called Now and Then, which is quite a splendid piece of work. And then there are 2 collaborations, one with Julian Lennon and one with Diane Warren. But in fact, we recorded 2 songs beyond that for the album. So I would say we recorded about 14, 12 of which wound up on the album. But you do other specific things. There are instrumental B-sides, instrumental mixes of songs, acoustic mixes of things, and you just have to be prudent in your choices in terms of what you put as B-sides.
So whenever it's time for a box set, you guys are going to have a lot of great stuff for that.
Yeah, I think so. In fact, for the Green Thoughts sessions, we recorded about 24 songs. Wow. I believe 11 of which wound up on the record.
Thank you for your call, Bill. Let's move on and speak with Debbie. She's a listener of Riff 101 in Detroit. Debbie, say hello to Pat.
Hi, Pat.
Hi, Debbie.
How are you?
Good. What can I do for you?
Oh, I just wanted to know if Jeff Lynne from ELO had any influence on the acoustic arrangements.
No, I don't think so. Not really. In terms of what song specifically do you mean?
Girls About Town in 1980.
If you listen to that song, it's got that quirky tremolo new wave type of thing. It's not a song I'm particularly proud of, although there are some people out there that enjoy our music that like it. I'm really at a loss to remember what I was listening to at the time. Probably Diva. I know, but I was not specifically a fan of ELO. We were more fans of the group The Move. I would say probably.
Thanks for the call, Debbie. One of the songs on the album Blow Up that marks a real departure, in a sense, is Too Much Passion. It's got the string section on that. That's a beautiful song. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, in writing the new album Blow Up, I was going through perhaps hours and hours of work cassette tapes that are accumulated from being on the road, and you'll be in a hotel room somewhere, and you have a melody or a bit of an idea, or on a tour bus, and you'll sing it into the Walkman cassette recorder. And so you've got endless miles of cassette tape of ideas, a fragment here and there. And typically on a 90-minute cassette, there might be 5 minutes of anything that's worth anything at all. But you have to go through the chore work of sitting down and dissecting these tapes. So in the process of doing that for the new album Blow Up, I uncovered a song that I had forgotten that I wrote called Too Much Passion, which in fact was written for the Smithereens 11 recording sessions. And there it was in its entirety, and I remember the frame of mind that I was in and where I wrote the song. It was in a small house in the woods in upstate New York, looking at the mountains and trees. And it was very obviously my homage or tribute to the songwriting style of Smokey Robinson, obviously a style more popular in 1966, but I think that perhaps I was trying to write the type of song that Smokey would have written for himself in the Miracles, or perhaps for Marvin Gaye at that time.
A beautiful one indeed. Let's listen to it now. Too Much Passion on RockLine. Smithereens, Too Much Passion, great new song from Blow Up on RockLine. Let's head back to the phones and speak with Shigeki. She is a listener of Bay FM 78 in Tokyo Bay. Say hello to Pat.
Hello, Pat.
Yes, hello.
Actually, this is, I'm a boy here.
Okay.
You said about she. Well, do I really get to ask you about one question?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, great. I just wondered one thing. Why did you decide to call the new album Blow Up?
I could say something awfully risque here, but I don't dare do it on American radio. It was meant as a joke, really, intentionally a joke, a play on words. It's meant to be read as one sentence. The Smithereens blow up, as in Smithereens pop explosion. It's actually, again, one of our clever homages to American or just pop culture in general. It's a tribute to the Michelangelo Antonioni film Blow Up, a movie which features a great cameo appearance by the legendary band the Yardbirds. And you'll notice in the film Blow Up that in the Yardbirds, in that incarnation of the band at that time, 1967, you had both Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck playing guitars together in that lineup. And it's a very memorable sequence where Jeff Beck smashes a guitar.
Quite an interesting story about the cover as well. Saul Bass did that?
Yeah, Saul Bass is a friend of ours who is one of the godfathers of graphic design, pretty much for the world, the United States primarily. But Saul did most of the movie posters and the title sequences on film for a lot of the Alfred Hitchcock movies, specifically Vertigo, North by Northwest. He directed the shower sequence for Hitchcock in Psycho, who was a protege of Hitchcock's. He did the titles for West Side Story, Man with the Golden Arm, I mean, you name it, Exodus. And even recently, he's worked with Martin Scorsese doing the title sequences for Cape Fear and Goodfellas. He did the movie poster for The Shining, as well as the corporate logos for AT&T, United Airlines, Quaker Oats, I mean, you name it. And so he was a bit of a hero to us, you know, and a role model in many ways. And at a certain point in the recording of the Blow Up album, we were at our wits' end in terms of coming up with a concept for the sleeve. We couldn't call them an album cover these days, you know, which is a loss to us because you can't hold them in your hand physically like you could or display them on your wall. But in any event, we called him up, and he was a bit taken aback. I think he had done one record cover prior to working with us, which was Sinatra's album Trilogy, which came out in the 70s. And after listening to the music, he informed us that he really liked the music a lot, and he looked at the other three album covers, the prior ones, and he said, and by the way, after looking at their album covers, these boys really, really need me. So we decided to work together.
Thanks, Shigeki, for the phone call. Let's move on and speak with Rod. He is a listener of 106 KKDJ in Fresno, California.
Hello.
Hello, Pat.
Hello, Rod.
How you doing?
Doing well.
Hey, I heard somewhere, this is like a two-part question, that Marshall Crenshaw had something to do early on in the career of the Smithereens. And the second part, is that him in the video for Blood and Roses?
No, well, I can explain what happened to our career as regards Marshall Crenshaw. We got to know him in the early days, sort of peripherally. We became friendlier much, much later on. But we found ourselves in the enviable position in 1980, 81 or so of opening for him at some shows. And as a band trying to get signed or trying to get their foot in the door, I would always give him a tape, and he would smile rather politely and I'm sure throw it in the garbage when he got home. But at a certain point during the recording of Especially for You, he was friends with the engineer, a good friend of ours named Jim Ball. They had worked together on a project, and he stopped by the studio and he played Hammond organ on a song called Strangers When We Meet, but he did it under the pseudonym Jerome. Now, I don't know why. You'll have to ask him regarding that. Now, in the Blood and Roses video, It's actually an actor whose name escapes me at this point, who was in a Cannon film called Dangerously Close, which leads us to another story. In terms of the sometimes ludicrous nature of why things happen and just chance and luck and the whole thing. We were signed to Enigma Records back in 1986, and at that point they had worked at a soundtrack deal with Cannon Films, and for the first release for Enigma by Cannon for a movie was called Dangerously Close, and they were going to do their first rock video, and the song that became the choice for the single for that album was a song called Blood and Roses. But in the old days of LPs, when you sequenced an LP, because you had to flip the record over, you would always do your singles as the first cut on the side. And Blood and Roses was actually the third cut on side 2, never meant to be a single at all. And the wife of the lawyer for Cannon happened to see a promo cassette lying around the house. She played it, loved the song, and that's how that song became a video and a single. But the reason why you see that character hanging out in the video is because he's a character in the movie, and it was a tie-in originally to the movie. It was a promotional video.
Interesting. Thanks for the phone call, Rod. When we come back, Pat will be playing live. We'll also take some more of your phone calls for Pat DiNizio of the Smithereens in just a few moments. The RockLine AT&T toll-free number is 1-800-344-ROCK. RockLine and AT&T, the right choice. Welcome back to RockLine and our evening with Pat DiNizio of the Smithereens. I'm Rita Wild for BC. And just a reminder, everyone who gets on the air tonight will win an autographed copy of the latest CD by the Smithereens called Blow Up. Right now, Pat's kind enough to play some more live material for us. What are you going to choose this time?
This is a tune, Rita, from our first album, which was called Especially For You. This tune is called Behind the Wall of Sleep.
Great.
And here it goes.
She had hair like Jeannie Shrimp, done back in 1965. She had legs that never ended. I was halfway paralyzed. She was tall and cool and pretty, and she dressed as black as coal. If she asked me to, I'd murder. I would gladly lose my soul. Now I lie in bed and think of her. Sometimes I even weep. Then I dream of her behind the wall of sleep. Well, she held a bass guitar and she was playing in a band, and she stood just like Bill Wyman. Now I am her biggest fan. Now I know I'm one of many who would like to be your friend, and I've got to find a way to let you know I'm not like them. Now I lie in bed and think of her. Sometimes I even weep. Then I dream of her behind the wall of sleep. Sometimes I even weep. Then I dream of her behind the wall of sleep. Got your number from a friend of mine who lives in your hometown. Called you up to have a drink. Your roommate said you weren't around. Now I know I'm one of many who would like to be your friend, and I've got to find a way to let you know I'm not like them. Now I lie in bed and think of her. Sometimes I even weep. Then I dream of her behind the wall of sleep. Behind the wall of sleep. Behind the wall of sleep. Behind the wall of sleep.
Yeah, that's such a great song.
Thank you.
Behind the Wall of Sleep. Let's go right back to the phone. Speak with Jack, a listener of 94 HJY in Providence, Rhode Island. Jack, say hello to Pat.
Hi, Pat.
Hi, Jack. Is Lupo still in existence there?
Yeah,
Lupo's
I believe
Heartbreak
it is.
Hotel.
You guys played a show a few years back at the living room in Providence.
Oh, I remember that one very well. It was really crowded.
Yeah, that place has since changed. It's moved. Pat, the question I've got for you is, on the album, especially for you, on the song you just performed, Behind the Wall of Sleep, I'd like to know how the words to the song came about.
The words to the song, in fact, the song in its entirety were written and scribbled on a cocktail napkin on a flight from what's the airport in Boston? Logan? Logan Airport to LaGuardia Airport in New York City. And it was this sort of epic struggle to retain the melody in my head as I dashed from the flight to the rental car and was stuck in traffic on the FDR Drive, trying to get to my apartment downtown in the East Village and running up the stairs to a 6-flight walk-up and singing it into a tape recorder. Specifically, the lyrics are about a girl who played bass in a band out of Boston back in the early 80s. And in fact, they're still together, a band called the Bristols. And for a long time, I sort of declined to comment specifically on the lyrics, but I guess in the end, it really doesn't matter. And she sort of became a bit of a minor local celebrity. She always was a celebrity in my mind. And it's about that. I've been asked about the lyrics to this song. People have said, is it about Amy Mann from Till Tuesday or Tina Weymouth from the Talking Heads? No, it's about Kim from the Bristols.
And now that mystery's been solved. Thank you for the phone call, Jack. Let's move on and speak with Darren. He is a listener of CD 98.3 in Joplin, Missouri. Darren, you're on the Rock Line.
Hey, Pat. How you doing?
Hi, Darren.
Hey, a couple questions for you. First one, how does the songwriting break down y'all's band? Just, I know you do most of it, but how much of a contribution does everybody else make?
Well, it's certainly always a group collaboration. I mean, especially in terms of the arrangement and the various musical input, you know. The way it works is usually I'll come up with an idea for a song and I'll do a demo at home on this Tascam 8-track cassette recorder that I have, which is really a wonderful piece of equipment that I'd recommend to anyone. I don't get an endorsement or anything. Of course, they could send me some gear. I wouldn't mind. But in any event, we all live in various parts of the country now. Mike, our bass player, lives in the Bay Area. Dennis and Jim still live in New Jersey, and I'm living in Chicago, so Federal Express helps things along quite nicely. But in any event, it certainly doesn't sound anything like the demos once the band gets a hold of it. You know, it's really a Smithereens project all the way. Jimmy Babjack has been writing a lot lately. He's come up with some great songs, most notably a new one called Now and Then, which is on Blow Up, which features the Cowsills on backing vocals. What was your other question?
First, I'd just like to encourage you to pull that Rickenbacker out of the mothballs one of these days. And also to, what do you guys do in your spare time? I know you don't get too much since you're on the road, but what do you guys like to do?
Well, speaking for myself, I like to read or I like to watch movies on VHS or Laserdisc. I'm a student of film. I mean, really, I just try to lead a normal life. I try to cook dinner, walk the dog, but I can't walk the dog now because he's dead. I don't know. I don't have a great answer for that. I don't really know what the rest of the guys do. We hardly even talk to each other anymore.
Most of them are record collectors, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, Dennis is a bit of a pop music historian. Our drummer, Dennis Dyken. Hello, Dennis, wherever you may be, as we speak. And he's been involved in the Capitol Collectors series, Capitol Records. He's done liner notes and supplied archival materials, and he's doing a wonderful job with that. Jimmy's at home now. He's got kids, and he's raising them, which is fathering or mothering is a full-time occupation. Mike enjoys sports, and Mike is really obsessive with his instrument. You'll find Mike practicing his bass pretty much all the time.
Now, isn't he also a great big baseball fan as well? Don't you have to like track him down during spring training?
Yeah, we had an opening act for a while, a band called View, which was comprised of professional baseball players. We'll have to thank Mike for that. Jack McDowell from the White Sox and another relief starting pitcher for the White Sox and a guy from the Cards. It was interesting.
Oh, great stuff. Thanks, Darren, for the phone call. Let's move on and speak with Gene. He is a listener of 96 RXR in Augusta, Georgia. Gene, you're on the Rock Line.
Yeah, hey, Pat, how you doing?
Is this Gene, the dancing machine?
Oh, you got it, man.
Hi, Gene.
I got 2 questions for you.
Okay.
Okay, number one is, how did it come about with the Outside Riders on the new album?
With the Outside Riders, in the case of Julian Lennon, that was sort of instigated by Julian. The song we came up with, If You Want the Sun to Shine, was originally intended for his most recent LP, which was called Help Yourself. We had been friends socially from the scene out here in Hollywood, and at a certain point in our tour in support of Smithereens 11, Julian called and suggested that we attempt to write a song for his most recent album. Both he and his producer Bob Ezrin passed on the song for reasons unknown, and we liked it enough to record it. The second songwriting collaboration with Diane Warren was more or less at the behest of management and label. Apparently, someone had listened to the demos and thought that there were no hits on the record, so they decided to put me together with someone who had written about a zillion #1 hits. But as it turned out, that wasn't a single. Although it was a great piece of work, and I learned a lot from Diane Warren about the songwriting process and how intuitively smart she is about writing songs. First off, by the fact that she brought a guitar to the songwriting session instead of a keyboard, which is her traditional instrument in terms of her writing, and her determination to walk away from the songwriting session with a song that was complete both lyrically and musically. Normally, I'm very lazy about the lyrics, to my ultimate regret sometimes. They're not often as good as they could have been had I put more work into it. And Diane was resolved to finish the lyrics while we were there so that they wouldn't sit around and we wouldn't have to deal with the situation of getting back to them at a later date. But it was just a great experience writing with her.
She's had tremendous success. Did you have another question, Gene?
Yes, I did. I wanted to know, personally for you, who inspired you the most?
In terms of songwriters, I would say my inspiration comes from songwriters like Buddy Holly, to start with, Otis Blackwell, who we worked with, Lee Bristoler, Holland Dozier Holland, the guys that wrote for Motown, Smokey Robinson, Ray Davies of the Kinks, John Fogerty, a largely unrecognized songwriter who was just great, and his productions were fabulous. Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, Pete Townsend of The Who. These were people that were role models for me as songwriters, and obviously the bands that they played in, groups like the Yardbirds and the Kinks, Manfred Mann, for example, The Who. In the early 70s, the Ramones, the Talking Heads, Black Sabbath. I was a tremendous Black Sabbath fan. Saw them about 20 times when I was 15 years old. And, a song like A Girl Like You is pretty much a hybrid between the sound and the aggression of the guitars of Black Sabbath and the melodic sensibility of the Beatles. We were also tremendous fans of the classic AM radio that we grew up listening to in the 60s and the 70s. So you sort of put that all into the mix, and there you have the Smithereens sound.
Yeah, great question, Gene. You are not really known as a political writer, but you've gone on record as saying that the song Tell Me When Did Things Go So Wrong is kind of political.
I didn't go on record as saying that, Rita. Capitol Records press department said that. Sorry, Judy. But in any event, I don't like to make political statements. I can leave that up or leave it to some other people who are infinitely more qualified. It seems as though, however, most of the political statements being made in the recording industry are done by people who have mansions in Beverly Hills, unfortunately. Far be it for me to judge. But in any event, lyrically, the song Tell Me When Did Things Go So Wrong is more about personal politics than about anything. It's about people that I went to school with in high school who sort of, whether they knew it or not, compromised their dream of being musicians, perhaps, by allowing themselves to become distracted. It's about the loss of youthful idealism to a certain extent. It's not about governmental sort of politics. It's about the death of the spirit more than anything.
Let's listen to it now on RockLine.
We used to walk in the sun.
The Smithereens from Blow Up. Tell me, when did things go so wrong? Just a reminder that everyone who gets on the air tonight will win an autographed copy of the latest CD by the Smithereens called Blow Up, courtesy of Capitol Records. So let's hear from you at 1-800-344-ROCK. We are talking rock and roll on RockLine.
RockLine.
Welcome back to RockLine and our evening with Pat DiNizio of the Smithereens. Let's head back to the phone. Speak with Kristen. She is a listener of FM 99 WNOR in Norfolk, Virginia. Kristen, you're on the RockLine.
Hi.
Hi, Kristen.
How you doing?
Doing well. Hello.
That's good. I'm a very big fan of yours, and I know you've had favorable critical reviews through the years, and what I wanted to know is how important that is to you.
I don't think anyone that considers themselves a so-called artist should really take stock, in that sort of thing. I think it warps your perspective on what you're doing creatively if you look to reviews or you look to be patted on the back or you're actively seeking praise. I've gotten to the point now where I'm not reading the reviews, good or bad. I mean, I'm thankful for people that can look at the work and understand it and appreciate it for what it is, and I'm also understanding of a so-called lesser opinion as well. But I don't think it does anyone any good who's creating the work to look at the reviews. I really don't.
Oh, great. Thanks, Kristen. Can we talk you into playing a song here for us?
Yes.
Great.
Shit.
The guitar is stuck to the stand.
I'll do one now from the first album, especially for you. This is a song that was written on a train from Stockholm to a place called Hoek van Holland.
Right.
In Holland, and sort of looking out the window of the train at the windmills and the tulips in Holland. It's called Cigarette.
Smoked my last cigarette, sat in bed for a while. Thought of your face and that brought me a smile. Wanted another one, fell back asleep instead. Woke and found you sitting there on the bed. Cigarette, cigarette, burning up time. Cigarette, cigarette, watch the smoke climb. Cigarette, cigarette, wasting away. Just like this cigarette, our time is running down. Only one out till you're leaving this town. Went to the corner store, bought us another pack. Held my arm round you as we headed back. I tried to change your mind, didn't want you to go. I want you more, it seems, than you could ever know. Cigarette, cigarette, burning up time. Cigarette, cigarette, watch the smoke climb. Cigarette, cigarette, wasting away. Just like this cigarette, our time is running down. Only one out till you're leaving this town. Just like this cigarette, our time is running down. Only one out till you're leaving this town. Smoked one last cigarette, sat in bed for a while. Thought of your face and that brought me a smile.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Some nice stuff there. A song written in Holland, and now a phone call from Tokyo Bay. Yuko is a listener of Bay FM 78. Yuko, say hello to Pat.
Hello?
Hello, Yuko.
Hi.
My question is that is it true that the song Evening Dress on your latest album was inspired by Japanese author Yukio Mishima?
Yeah, actually, quite a lot of the titles of songs, of the Smithereens songs that I've written, are inspired by Mishima, who's a hero of mine, a wonderful writer. And, I can't say enough about the guy. It's an inspiration for me in many ways. Evening Dress is a short story, but it's an untranslated Japanese story. So in one of the many biographies of Mishima, I was looking through the index, the selection of the work he had written that was untranslated, and there was a title there, and it said Evening Dress, and it conjured up the most wonderful lyric imagery for me. And, simply enough, that's where I got it from.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Yuko. Let's move on and speak with Dean. He is a listener of 96 Rock in Atlanta, Georgia. Dean, you're on the Rock Line.
Hello, Pat. How are you?
Hi, Dean.
I'm looking forward to seeing you at the amphitheater here in April.
Well, we're looking forward to coming down there again. It's been a while.
Okay, that's the question I'm getting at is from seeing you in the club circus over the last decade, I'd like to know your feelings on hitting the larger venues here as a headliner here in the States now.
Well, you sort of have to shift gears in terms of gauging your performance to the size of the room. We try to play every gig, whether it's a small club or whether it's an arena opening for someone, the same, and we often, I should say always play the gig the same way, whether there's 10 people in the audience or there's 10,000 people. I think that the problem is the vastness of the larger places, and when your audience has seen you and has grown with you and supported you throughout your career and you're playing small places, oftentimes the audience feels as though they don't have you anymore. You're not a part of them anymore. So to a certain extent, it's the perception of people coming to see you. And in the other sense, it's a very real problem because you're dealing with bigger rooms and there's sound problems inherent in that situation. The audience is further from you. So the key to the problem or the solution is to try to turn a large venue into a small nightclub, which is a difficult thing. I think we do fairly well at it, but I think we're always going to play a certain type of club. We're always going to go back and play the small clubs, and hopefully we can play the large places as well. We're not that big yet.
That's great that you can go back and play the clubs like that, though. I think that there's a lot to be said about that. Thank you for the phone call, Dean. Let's move on and speak with Ray. He is a listener of 107 Kick FM in Calgary, Alberta. Ray, you're on the Rock Line.
Yeah, hi, Pat. How's it going?
Hi, Ray.
I was wondering if you have any Canadian dates planned down the road.
Yeah, I think so. I think so in the summer for sure, because we've only just done a gig in Toronto a few months ago at Lee's Palace. Are you familiar with that place?
No, actually.
No, and I think the last time we were in Alberta was probably in 1986 on the tour in support of Especially For You. Unfortunately, the label we were with at the time, Enigma, hadn't informed us that the record hadn't been released yet in Canada.
So you do have plans to go there?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be in your town soon.
Excellent. Thank you for the phone call, Ray. We'll be back with more phone calls, some more live music as well from Pat on RockLine on the Global Satellite Network.
RockLine.
Welcome back to RockLine with our evening with Pat DiNizio. Let's take a couple more calls here as we close it out and speak with Todd. He is a listener of 97X in Davenport, Iowa. Todd, you're on the RockLine.
Hi, Pat.
Hi, Todd.
Is it true that you played with a band called the Full Face Men and that included Peter Buck?
Yeah, I was only on vinyl, on record, on tape with a band called the Full-Time Men, which was a solo project from Keith Strang, the guitarist from the Fleshtones, and his buddy Peter Buck from R.E.M. And in fact, on one of the records, I played, my contribution was just one note of feedback that lasted about 2 minutes, and the song was called We're All High on Drugs Together.
Do you still keep in contact at all with Peter Buck?
I'm only an acquaintance of Peter Buck. I've met him a few times. They were nice enough many years ago, back in 1984, when they were trying to break the European market. I went to see them at the Marquee Club, which is a very famous club in London. And I mentioned Keith Strang's name, and they fed me beers all night and got me drunk.
Thanks for the phone call, Todd. Time for one more song from Pat here, another acoustic number.
Yeah, well, this is perhaps one of our most recognizable songs. This is called Blood and Roses. the way it was written.
It was long ago, seemed like yesterday. Saw you standing in the rain, then I heard you say, I want to love, but it comes out wrong. I want to live, but I don't belong. I close my eyes and I see blood and roses. For flowers in the springtime, October we were wed. In wintertime the roses died. Her blood ran cold and then she said, I want to love, but it comes out wrong, wrong. I want to live, but I don't belong. I close my eyes and I see blood and roses. It was long ago, seemed like yesterday. Saw you standing in the rain, then I heard you say, I want to love, but it comes out wrong. I want to live, but I don't belong. I close my eyes and I see blood and roses. Blood and roses, roses, roses. Blood and roses. Blood and roses.
Some good stuff there indeed. Let's take another phone call. Amy is a listener of the Loop FM 98 in Chicago. Amy, you have the distinction, I think, of being our last caller tonight. Hello.
Yeah, hi, Pat.
Hi, Amy.
I have a question. Your first album took you only 10 days to put together, and every album after that you took a little longer. Finally, your last one took 3 to 4 months. Which pace do you actually prefer?
I prefer the pace of working intuitively, cutting an album quickly, not belaboring it, not intellectualizing the process of recording a record. Unfortunately, in this day and age, to compete with everything else out there on the radio in this musical world we're living in now of sounds that are more real than the sounds you can produce by playing acoustic instruments. It's a sort of enhanced reality, and the audience's ears are now tuned or attuned or sort of used to hearing this enhanced reality. You have to take more time and more care with the records. I would think or like to believe that with the next album we're going to have a compromise between the length that it took to record the most recent album, Blow Up, which was about 4 months, and the 10 days that it took to record and mix, especially for you, hopefully somewhere in the middle. Smithereens 11 took about a month and a half to do. I think that's a good ballpark figure. But again, it's no one's idea of a picnic to be locked in a studio for 4 months, although we're pleased and grateful to do what we do for a living. It takes the life out of the project, and records become more and more sterile year after year because there's too much time and thought being put into it. I would say you write the songs, you rehearse them for a week, you go in the studio and you cut everything live and you do your overdubs and your mix down, and then you're done with it and let the chips fall where they may.
Great call, Amy. So for the future plans for the Smithereens, I'm sure you're going to be on the road for quite some time.
Yeah, if the new album continues to do well, we can expect to be on the road, hopefully, for the better part of the year. We'll be starting up in Detroit around the 28th or 29th of this month. And, we've been fortunate in that we've been allowed to work. We have the work. The economy being what it is in the recession, there's not a lot of work. A lot of people are being more careful about how they spend their money, and we're certainly grateful to everyone that comes to our shows.
Well, it's a great show indeed. Thanks to everybody for listening and calling. If you'd like to drop us a line, our address is P.O. Box 4383, Hollywood, California, 90078. Next week, all 4 members of Metallica will be making their first ever RockLine appearance, so please tune in for that. Special thanks tonight go out to Judy Kerr, Jeff Shane, and Jeff Blaylock of Capitol Records, to Bert Stein of Demand Entertainment, to Dave Wiederman of the Guitar Center, and to our guest tonight from the Smithereens, Pat DiNizio. I've enjoyed your music for many years, and it was a real pleasure for the last 90 minutes here. I'm Rita Wild for Bob Coburn. Good night, everybody.